Yesterday, I studied from one question to audience, and I would like you also to think after maybe my remarks who we are, the United States and the Russian Federation. We are enemies today. We are partners. We are friends. We are allies. I remember that during the Second World War we were allies. Situation has been drastically changed, and today it's rather difficult to speak about partnership, about friendship, but as to me, as to my colleagues, we still are sure that the United States and the Russian Federation are his partners. And I'll try to prove you today how much we can do together if we are united. Russia and the United States, as the major nuclear powers and permanent UN Security Council members, bear special responsibility for maintaining global peace and security. Our countries traditionally play leading roles in arms control, disarmament and non-proliferation. Consecutive reduction and limitation of nuclear arsenal made a significant positive impact on the overall level of international security. Russia and the United States share fruitful experience in joining their efforts to strengthen global and regional security. On the plus side, we have a series of treaties ranging from the interim agreement between the USSR and the United States on certain measures with respect to the limitation of strategic offensive arms to the Treaty on Measures for Further Reduction and Limitation of Strategic Offensive Arms, so-called New START Treaty of 2010. In accordance with the treaty between the USSR and the United States on the limitation of their intermediate range and shorter range missiles INF Treaty, we have managed to fully get rid of two classes of nuclear missile weapons, intermediate range and shorter range ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles. According to American estimations, the realization of presidential initiatives of 1991-1992 allowed the two countries to reduce their stockpile of non-strategic nuclear weapons by 75 to 85% if compared to the peak of the Cold War. I believe that the withdrawal from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, the ABM Treaty, was a principal political mistake made by the United States in 2002. I am certain that this decision was not based on a search for means of tackling real threats. It was not an adequate response to them, and it did not solve the task at hand. It was a political decision reflecting a one-sided approach which undermined the strategic stability. Despite one-sided disruption of the ABM Treaty, we have managed to sign the New START Treaty in 2010. One of the current goals is to reach the level of strategic arms set by the treaty by February 2018. I would like to assure you that the Russian side will fulfill our obligations. Russia and the United States work actively in the UN Disarmament Commission, the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva, within the Convention of Prohibition of the Biological and Toxic Weapons, the Organization of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the Inhuman Weapon Convention. We are depositories of the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, an agreement of fundamental importance of non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament. We closely interact in international atomic energy in Vienna. Russia and the United States have launched major international counterterrorism and non-proliferation initiatives, such as the Proliferation Security Initiative and the Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism. Our nations co-authored an important UN Security Council Resolution 1540 to prevent non-government actors from acquiring weapons of mass destruction. Together, we have achieved results regarding the Iranian nuclear program. We are now trying to resolve the pressing issue, which is the North Korean nuclear and missile ambitions. There are quite many positive examples of such cooperation, but the potential for joint struggle for peace, security, disarmament, strengthening non-proliferation and arms control is far from being exhausted. We can do so much more if we respect the national interest of each other. The primary goal for us is to build a security architecture which would implement in practice the principle of equal and indivisible security for every state. Bringing up the prospects for further reduction of strategic offensive arms, I would like to point out that the Russian security is not solely determined by the balance of strategic nuclear weapons of two countries. It depends on many other factors, including the plan to develop the United States global missile defense system, long-range precision systems, or we call it strategic offensive arms in non-nuclear configuration, nuclear armaments of the United States allies in NATO, the prospects for withdrawal of the US non-strategic nuclear weapons from Europe, along with dismantlement of its storage infrastructure overseas, balance of conventional forces, presence of a large number of military bases with a growing military infrastructure near the Russian borders, implementation of the idea of the deployment or deploying weapons in outer space, the future of the comprehensive test ban treaty, and the situation with non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction in itself. The issue of including absolutely all nuclear states in the process of limiting and reducing nuclear weapons is becoming increasingly pressing. As to me, you see that frankly, it seems to me that it's unfair that only the United States and the Russian Federation are bound by some limitations. And I would like to say the same regarding INF. We will, I hope, that return back to this point later. Can Russia ignore all these factors when making decisions on the future of arms control, especially when it comes to nuclear weapons? It is hardly acceptable to speak about a nuclear zero while dismissing these problems and their interconnections. That's why, that is the reason why Russia consistently advocates reducing nuclear confrontation while insisting on finding mutually acceptable solutions to key security issues. By the way, I remember the last day of our negotiations with the United States. I remember that beautiful hall where there was an American delegation led by distinguished, smart diplomat, professional diplomat Rose Gottemüller, and there was a delegation from the Russian Federation. I offered at that time, at that second, to the United States, let's not leave Geneva. Let's continue discussions on other issues regarding strategic stability, and I have enumerated all of them. The answer from American side was no. At that time, we didn't want to discuss these issues with you. But I would like to say you that without finding solution on all of these issues, for a normal state, it will be very difficult to move ahead regarding the reduction of nuclear weapons. Now, there are some attempts from various corners of the international community to elaborate a new treaty prohibiting nuclear weapons and trying to press on nuclear weapon state to sign it, or even to create such treaty without a nuclear weapon state. It's impossible. It's useless. We will never support such idea. And as I understand that the position of the United States is the same. The prospect of nuclear disarmament are directly linked to the situation with non-proliferation. Nuclear states can play their steps for nuclear disarmament only under firm guarantees. The non-nuclear states do not pursue nuclear weapons. Nuclear non-proliferation also has its issues. It faces some serious challenges. I will name a few: universality of the NPT, entry into force of the CTBT, security guarantees to non-nuclear states, establishment of nuclear weapon-free zones, ban on the production of fissile materials for nuclear arms, peaceful application of nuclear energy. I wish to emphasize that strengthening non-proliferation mechanism is one of the key issues of compliance with the nuclear non-proliferation regime. The IAEA plays a central role as the sole international organization that ensures the required balance between the development of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes and compliance with non-proliferation commitment. Since I am limited in time, I shall address just only one issue: the CTBT. The treaty opened for signature on September 24, 1996, but it has not taken effect yet. I wish to remind that according to the treaty conditions, in order for it to take effect, all 44 states possessing nuclear capabilities, possesses energy or research nuclear reactors, must sign and ratify it. The document was signed and ratified by Russia, France, and the United Kingdom. Among the nuclear nations, although the United States and China signed the CTBT, but they have not yet ratified. It feels like the current administration is far from figuring out its stand on the treaty, the fate of which will define the future program of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. The situation is closely being monitored by other important countries: India, Pakistan, Egypt, Israel, Iran, needless to say, by North Korea as well. This is why the ratification of CTBT by the United States could give a significant positive impulse to other states, the ratification of which is required for the treaty to take effect. It is hard for me not to mention the Iranian nuclear program. The agreement of 2015 on settling the situation with Iran's nuclear program and the adoption of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action managed to settle of one of the most pressing international issues. We believe that continuation of a steady implementation of the JCPOA serves mutual interests. It is worth mentioning that the International Atomic Energy has no complaints about Iran's compliance. In this regard, we are anxiously keeping an eye on how the situation regarding this issue is unfolding in Washington. Another important problem is North Korea's nuclear missile ambitions. We believe that it can only be resolved through political and diplomatic means. From our perspective, a solution will not be achieved with intensified sanctions on Pyongyang, increased military activities near North Korea's borders, and threats of using military forces, including nuclear weapons. It's important to keep up the efforts on multilateral disarmament. We want to resolve the situation at the CD, a unique platform that brings together all key players of international politics, including the United Nations Security Council permanent members. For more than 15 years, the participants have been failing to agree on program of work, while there are actual suggestions and even draft treaties on the negotiating table. I am referring to the draft treaty prepared by Russia and China on the prevention of the placement of weapons in outer space and threat of use of force against outer space objects. It has gained broad international support. It is considered to be the most elaborated document to start the negotiations. In 2016, in Geneva, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov introduced an initiative to work out an international convention for suppression of acts of chemical and biological terrorism. The draft is aimed to strengthen the international legal base on countering weapons of mass destruction terrorism. At the CD, we are also ready to discuss nuclear disarmament, security guarantees to non-nuclear states, as well as other challenges related to disarmament and strengthening of international security. Overall, there are plenty of issues, and in order to resolve them, we need to maintain a full-scale interaction on the whole agenda relating to strategic stability and international security. A format to address this issue has already been established. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Lipkov and the United States Undersecretary for Political Affairs Thomas Shannon held several rounds of consultations on strategic stability. It goes without saying that Minister Lavrov and Secretary Tillerson maintain constructive and productive contacts on a regular basis on all of these issues. I cannot but bring up the telephone call between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the United States President Donald Trump on November 21st, during which they discussed the situation in Syria and North Korea, among other things. It is an effective impulse for diplomats of both countries to step up the efforts in order to strengthen international security. With that, we assume that the dialogue should be conducted on equal basis and mutual consideration of each other's interests. The current priority should be a serious joint work to consequently develop conditions which would advance strengthening weapons of mass destruction non-proliferation, their means of delivery, maintaining and adjusting arms control mechanism where needed. All this in return will have a positive effect on international stability, peace and security based on the principle of equal and indivisible security for all. To get this principle, we failed trying to get within 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.